ground. Sorry.
Neighbours, everybody needs good neighbours. Just a friendly wave each morning helps to make a better day. Neighbours need to get to know each other. Next door is only a footstep away. Neighbours, everybody needs good neighbours with a little understanding. You can find the perfect blend. Neighbours should be there for one another. That's when good neighbours become friends.
Tuesday on 1 and at 7, a change to the published programme as Peter Sissons analyses the result of the ballot for Conservative Party leadership. At 7:30, confrontation in the Queen Vic.
I had those tests done at my expense. I intend to discuss the results with my solicitor, then we will decide what further action will be taken.
At 8, Tom and Barbara can have too much of a good thing.
I know what you two want. A break.
Oh, yes, good idea. We've got 59p. We'll have a couple of weeks in Acapulco.
At 8:30, questions of sport for teams led by Ian Botham and Bill Beaumont. Questions of conscience at 9:30 for the Kane brothers.
You're the one that's joined the ranks of the unrighteous now. Harbouring a fugitive is a very serious offence, mate.
After gaining unprecedented access to the 8 blocks of the Maze prison, Inside Story at 10:20 talks to prison officers and IRA and Loyalist prisoners in Northern Ireland's maximum security terrorist jail. At 11:20, Film 90 reviews the arrival of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles on the big screen. Tuesday on 1.
In Look East tonight, the fight to save the Swans caught up in an oil spill at Ipswich docks. And a roundup of all the other news stories in the region tonight. That's after an extended 6 o'clock news, which will bring you the result of the Conservative leadership ballot. So join us for Look East sometime after 6:50.
There's Western Rebellion in BBC Two's evening film shortly, The Last Command. This is BBC1. And now an extended 6 o'clock news with Anna Ford in the studio and Peter Sissons at Westminster.
Good evening. On the stroke of 6 o'clock, deep inside the Palace of Westminster, a door has just closed. The door to Committee Room 12, the room in which Conservative members of Parliament have today cast their votes for who should be the leader of their party. Now, the 372 ballot papers are being tipped from the ballot box, and within the next half hour, the result should be known. It is a result that will tell us whether Margaret Thatcher can carry on at number 10 or whether there may soon be another occupant. The nation waits and the candidates wait. She, in Paris, with world leaders at the European Security Conference, waits for the telephone call telling her the result. Michael Heseltine cast his vote early. How many others have thrown in their lot with him? Are there enough to settle it, or at least to keep the issue open? Well, we will soon know. After one of the most feverish weeks in post-war politics, we will be on the air for the declaration and reaction to it. But before we go any further, the day's other headlines from Anna Ford.
British Rail is to be prosecuted over the 1988 Clapham rail crash. 35 people died. BR's charged with failing to ensure the safety of passengers and staff. And Saddam Hussein orders the release of all German hostages still held in Iraq.
The votes are being counted now. Within half an hour, we will know the result, and the tension here at Westminster is tangible. The battle for the leadership could end tonight or start again in earnest tomorrow. If either candidate wins by a substantial majority, the contest will be over, but if too many voters abstain or if the margin is narrow, there'll be a second ballot. and then more candidates, perhaps cabinet ministers, can put themselves forward. Whatever the result, the Labour leader Neil Kinnock has demanded a general election be held. Tonight he tabled a motion of no confidence in the government.
The man who hopes he'll soon be posing for the cameras outside number 10 seemed cheerful enough. His camp are confident, buoyant even, but then nothing's to be taken at face value on this day. Certainly they're weighing their public words carefully. After another photo call, Mr Heseltine went straight to Committee Room 12. His only comment as he emerged, he knew he had at least one vote. He certainly didn't get the first one cast. Sir Nicholas Fairbairn says it's a tradition that he's at the head of the queue and that he backs the winner.
I've always carried the flag for her, and that's important.
You've always been the first to vote, have you?
Always for her.
And do you think she's going to win today?
Yes. She's won Eastern Europe. If she can't win Britain, it'll be a sad day.
Another early bird, the Prime Minister's Parliamentary Private Secretary, Peter Morrison. After delivering the letter authorising her proxy vote, he flew to Paris, where he's standing by the telephone, waiting to hear the verdict. All day, backbenchers and ministers have been taking the decision in an upper room of the House of Commons. Their names are ticked off against a list, they're given a ballot paper, and they find a quiet corner to put a cross against one of two names.
There are a couple of them, aren't there? There's a nice lady and this very, very handsome chap, and I shall just sort of consider their various merits.
But you're the first person this morning who's refused to tell us how they're going to vote.
Get away. Well, there's a first for everything, isn't there?
He certainly wasn't the last. Many MPs are thankful this is a secret ballot. Others, of course, are proud to declare their allegiance.
I, of course, am hoping very much indeed that today's vote will see a change in premiership. And good things ahead for Mrs Thatcher as well. I've supported her to the hilt. Perhaps some international role can be found for her. There's masses of work for her to do. She's a world figure, dominating the world stage. But we need a new leader. It's a new decade with new things going to happen for us.
So I voted for Mrs Thatcher. I'm in favour of keeping a remarkable Prime Minister in her job.
Main thing now, I think, after the event will be to unite the party. I believe that it can unite under a new leader, and I believe it can unite under Michael Heseltine.
And the future is the only topic at Westminster. With Mrs Thatcher in Paris, the leader of the House took Prime Minister's questions. Labour called her a lame duck, demanded a general election, and generally had some fun at their opponent's expense.
Is he aware that at the weekend the Prime Minister accused the Right Honourable Gentleman, the member for Henley, of pursuing Labour Party policy? Could this be why he is so much further ahead in public opinion than she is?
No one in Mrs Thatcher's camp finds it funny. The mood is sombre, not because they think they'll lose, quite the reverse. They're predicting a clear victory, but because the stakes are so high and there's quiet anger that the contest is happening at all.
I mean, it's incredible that 150 members of Parliament, and we don't even know their names, can try and unseat the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. And what about the electorate?
I must say, in 25 years here, I've never known anything quite so nasty or cruel. Quite frankly, to have a Prime Minister going over to Paris to negotiate with foreign leaders and knowing that people over here are conspiring against her seems to be outrageous.
There's an air of unreality here at Westminster. Several Tory MPs have told me they can't believe today is happening. Whatever the result, the Conservative Party has been damaged. Whoever the leader, it's not likely that the road back to unity will be a smooth one.
Well, as you heard, while attention here has been focused on the leadership contest, Mrs Thatcher has been in Paris attending the European Security Conference. She spent the day meeting world leaders, discussing European unity and the Gulf crisis.
The Prime Minister took every opportunity to immerse herself in the diplomatic round, deliberately avoiding any public comment on the leadership ballot. Looking confident and relaxed, she left early for a series of meetings with other leaders. Appropriately, the first call was on President Gorbachev. British sources said he seemed to give every impression of being firmly in control of his position within the Soviet Union. There's no indication of how Mr. Gorbachev viewed Mrs. Thatcher's position. But the general impression is that all the leaders the Prime Minister met were anxious to avoid becoming involved in British domestic politics. They were, in any case, rather pressed for time. There were moments when Mrs. Thatcher could reflect during an open session of the conference, but most of the work was in private talks outside with only the occasional hiccup.
I'm just going to tell the President that...
Yes, of course. With President Mitterrand and the others, the main subject was the Gulf, and the need to keep the coalition against Saddam Hussein united. But it wouldn't have been human if Mrs. Thatcher's thoughts hadn't sometimes been elsewhere. Her parliamentary secretary arrives at the airport. His job tonight to give her the leadership result.
You sure she's won? You can't be sure until all the ballots, all the votes are counted, but I think it'll be good news.
Are her team confident?
I don't want to sound complacent, but I think it'll be good news. All right?
The first ballot? What will be your role here?
Well, somebody has to receive the news and pass it to the Prime Minister. I'll be doing that.
You'll be getting the news from who?
I suspect I'll probably be getting news from the Chief Whip.
And after that, do you think that she's going to stand in a second ballot regardless, if it has to be one?
She's always said she'd fight to the end, but I don't expect that will be necessary.
If it is necessary, she will.
I would be surprised if she didn't, put it like that.
An hour and a half ago, Mrs. Thatcher arrived back at the British Embassy. It is here where she will be told whether she does have enough support from her MPs to continue as Prime Minister.
And John Sargent joins us now, live from Paris. John, what sort of mood is she in? We'd forgive her, I suppose, for feeling a bit lonely today.
Well, we're told she's confident, but I've certainly noticed some signs of strain. And in the past, Mrs. Thatcher has been very cautious about election results. Her view has been in the past that until all the votes are counted, you can't be certain. And so I've certainly noticed signs that she's not assuming that she's definitely got through in the first ballot. But we're all waiting to see, and I think that's what she's waiting for.
Now, she'll take the phone call from her PPS, and then when will she make a comment about the news she hears?
We're expecting her to come down these steps behind me in about an hour's time. It's interesting, we were told a very short time ago that she's decided not to go to the entertainment which is going to take place before the official dinner in Versailles tonight. Now, that was going to be a selection of ballet, and she's not going to that. We were told that instead she's going to stay here, take some more phone calls after making the statement, and then she's going to go on to the dinner. Now, all that implies that Mrs. Thatcher wants to leave her options open this evening, that she's not exactly confident of knowing what the outcome will be.
And she will make that statement on those steps regardless of the outcome.
That's what we're led to believe, and I think that is true. She's going to come out, it may be a very short statement, there'll be a few questions, but she will then make her position clear, and we're also told that she's expecting to have a news conference tomorrow, and at the moment she's due to speak in the House of Commons tomorrow and make a statement on the Paris talks.
John Sargent in Paris, thank you very much. And now we've got some tape, which we're running now, of Michael Heseltine, who arrived a short time ago back at his home in Belgravia. He's going to, well, he'll be in there by now, probably watching this programme, waiting for the result with the rest of us. And we hope maybe to see him emerge later on when we know the result. Well, our political correspondent, Nick Jones, has been following the Mr. Heseltine throughout the day. He joins us now from outside the Challenger's London home.
He looked, I thought, Michael Heseltine, quite cheerful when he went in. He waved for the cameras. The street outside his home has now been closed off to traffic. Inside are members of his family, also Michael Mates, who's worked with him so closely during this campaign. Now, Michael Heseltine has said that he wants to be inside his own home with his family when the result comes through on the telephone. He also wants to be, I think, away from the immediate gaze of the news media, inside his own home. Just in case, as we've heard from Paris, there's some time to go before Mrs. Thatcher makes any comment herself. He wants to wait until perhaps she has spoken first.
So, Nick, he will wait until the Prime Minister has spoken before he speaks. Is that a definite assertion?
Michael Mates made it quite clear when he spelt out his movements that one objective of Mr. Heseltine was to make sure that he waits to see what happens. He might want to see, if in fact there is going to be a second ballot, what Mrs. Thatcher has to say first. That is a possibility, yes, that he will wait until he's seen and heard what Mrs. Thatcher has had to say. Of course, it depends on the result. If it's the outright victory, which some of his supporters have been saying, but which many people at Westminster don't think is likely, then of course that won't apply. But certainly it's quite clear he wants, I think, to consider with his team, with his campaign team, Michael Mates is with him, exactly what to say once that result comes through.
Nick Jones, thank you very much. Well, now our political correspondent Lance Price has been assessing the mood of Conservative MPs as the ballot result draws closer. He joined us now from outside St Stephen's entrance across the way. Lance, what sort of mood are Tory MPs in tonight?
Well, a few minutes ago, when the ballot closed at 6 o'clock, the mood was pretty feverish in the committee corridor outside. There was a solemn procession as the ballot box was carried from Committee Room 12, where the voting's been taking place, through into Committee Room 10, where the count is now going on. There are two overseers from each of the two camps in there while that count is going on. There's a throng of MPs outside eagerly anticipating the results. I'm afraid we can't give you any clear indication of what that result will be, except to say that one Thatcherite minister said that he was very anxious just after 6 o'clock.
Now, a piece of paper will be handed out with the result on it, or will there be a more formal declaration?
No, there'll be a formal declaration to the MPs inside the committee room. As far as we're concerned, on the outside, a piece of paper will be handed out with the figures on, and those are the figures that we're so eagerly anticipating.
And how long do you think it'll be before we get them?
I would be surprised if we got them in less than about a quarter of an hour. Obviously, they've got to count all 372 votes. Perhaps one or two didn't vote, but something in the region of 372 votes. They're going to make doubly sure they've got them right, of course, before they give them to us.
Now, how are Conservative members reacting to the no confidence vote that Neil Kinnock has put down this evening?
Well, it's a mixed reaction. A lot of Conservative MPs were expecting this, and I understand from the Conservative Whip's office that they thought it was only a matter of time before this came. The Leader of the House of Commons, John Wakeham, was told about it a short time ago. He knew nothing about it because the announcement obviously only came at 5:30. I think the debate will take place probably tomorrow. The argument from Mr. Kinnock's camp is that whoever wins this election, if there is an outright victory this evening, that person will not have the full confidence of the Conservative Party and therefore cannot assume to have the full confidence of the House of Commons. So Labour are repeating their argument that it should go to the country and that the electorate as a whole should have a chance to decide who is Prime Minister.
Lance Price, thank you very much. We'll hear from you soon, no doubt. Well, we'll bring you the result as soon as we get it later in the programme. But for now, for the rest of the news, back to Anna Ford in the studio.
The British Railways Board is to be prosecuted over the Clapham railway accident in which 35 people died nearly 2 years ago. Nearly 500 people were also injured, 69 of them seriously, as a passenger train ran into the rear of a stationary train in December 1988. A third empty train coming from the other direction hit the wreckage.
It's nearly 2 years since the accident at Clapham Junction. British Rail is now facing 2 charges under the Health and Safety at Work Act. The first charge accuses British Rail of not providing an effective signalling system and so failing to ensure the safety of its staff, including the train driver who died in the accident, Mr. John Rolls. The second charge alleges that British Rail failed to ensure that passengers were not exposed to safety risks. Today's announcement comes more than a year after a critical report from Sir Anthony Hidden, the lawyer who held a public inquiry into the accident. 6 months ago, Alan Green, the Director of Public Prosecutions, announced that, as a matter of law, there was no evidence to prosecute British Rail or any of its staff for manslaughter. In September, an inquest returned verdicts of unlawful killing on the 35 people who died in the Clapham disaster.
British Rail is being prosecuted by the Railway Inspectorate, the government body responsible for safety on railway property. The Inspectorate wants the case to be tried by a judge and jury. If convicted, British Rail would face an unlimited fine. There won't be a hearing until the new year, and British Rail has not yet decided how it will plead to the charges.
The Railway Inspectorate prosecution, coming after the public inquiry, the DPP's investigation and the inquest verdict, will be the fourth opportunity for the law to decide where to put the blame for the Clapham accident. It's likely to provoke further calls for a more coherent way of dealing with the legal consequences of major disasters.
President Saddam Hussein has ordered the Iraqi parliament to approve the release of all remaining Germans being held hostage in Iraq. He said the decision was made in response to Chancellor Kohl's call for a peaceful solution to the Gulf crisis. About 170 Germans are left in Iraq, but it's not clear when they'll be allowed to leave. Baghdad has also said it will free 105 Dutch nationals over the next month.
It has been labelled an extraordinary meeting of the Iraqi parliament. It's tasked to rubber stamp a decision already taken by Saddam Hussein to release the German hostages. And the purpose of it all, to suggest that the decision to take hostages in the first place was not just the judgment of one man, but at the behest of the Iraqi people themselves. There are 170 Germans still being held in Iraq and Kuwait. 150 others were released 2 weeks ago, following the visit here by Willy Brandt. Today's announcement, the Iraqis say, is the result of Chancellor Kohl's plea for a peaceful conclusion to the Gulf crisis, and because large numbers of Germans have been working on Iraqi projects. The French National Party leader, Mr. Le Pen, who's been to see Saddam Hussein and pledged his desire for peace and negotiation, has been told that he has secured the release of a number of Europeans. Nationalities haven't been disclosed, and it's not known when they or the Germans will be free to go. The Iraqis want to keep releasing hostages. Although the British and Americans are unlikely to get out in any significant numbers before Christmas, other nationalities are a different matter. Saddam Hussein regards the release process as a form of protection against American attack, and he wants to maintain the momentum. Michael Macmillan, BBC News in Baghdad.
Hungary's Prime Minister today proposed the ending of the Warsaw Pact by 1992 at the latest. Joseph Ontol was speaking at the European Security Conference in Paris, where former communist states are placing increasing hope in the West as the guarantor of peace on the continent. Earlier, officials at the conference were playing down reports that Presidents Bush and Gorbachev had failed to resolve their differences over the Gulf. From Paris, Martin Sixsmith.
With harmony and in cooperation.
George Bush was asking Mikhail Gorbachev to support a UN resolution endorsing the use of force against Iraq. And the American president ended the meeting in buoyant mood.
Hey, how are you? Good to see you. How you been?
He didn't win immediate public backing from the Soviets, but all the signs today are that Moscow is moving closer to the American position, with Mr. Bush himself saying he believes all will be well. And the French government confirmed this afternoon that discussions on the wording of a resolution are now underway.
This has begun, in particular between the permanent members of the Security Council.
As Mr. Gorbachev conferred with his military advisors this morning, one consideration in the president's mind was the impact on domestic Soviet opinion of any endorsement of military action. Foreign Minister Shevardnadze has pledged that he'll consult the Soviet parliament before making any public declaration, an undertaking that may partially explain Mr. Gorbachev's seeming hesitation over supporting the US initiative. Mrs. Thatcher, who was seeing her NATO allies today, was reported to have been encouraged by her meeting with Mr. Gorbachev that the Soviets are now moving towards accepting Washington's resolution. Secretary of State James Baker has been asking the member countries of the UN Security Council to attend a special meeting next week to vote through the resolution on military action. But he also indicated that he'd abandon his mission if he ran into Soviet opposition. This morning, a US official confirmed that that mission is not being abandoned. But while Mr. Gorbachev is forging new alliances with his former NATO adversaries, his old partners in the Warsaw Pact decided to go their separate ways today. Hungarian Prime Minister Josef Antal announcing the winding up of the bloc's military structure and saying the whole alliance will disappear within 2 years. Martin Sixsmith, BBC News, Paris.
The Spanish Prime Minister today called for talks over the future of Gibraltar. Mr. Felipe González used his speech at the European Security Conference in Paris to return to the question of ownership of the colony. He described it as an anachronistic vestige of an old order, and he warned that the new era of cooperation in Europe could be threatened by difficulties such as the dispute between Britain and Spain over the ownership of the rock. A 25-year-old man has appeared before magistrates in Hemel Hempstead, charged with the abduction and detention of 4-year-old Simon Jones. Simon was found at a hostel near his home on Sunday. He'd been missing nearly 8 weeks. Peter Anthony May, who gave an address in the town, left the court under police escort. He also faces an additional charge. He was remanded in custody for 6 days. Human trials of a forerunner to a potential AIDS vaccine have begun in London. Injections have been given to 20 volunteers who were tested as HIV negative. The initial results will be known in 6 months.
The search for a vaccine against AIDS took a significant step forward today at St Mary's Hospital in London. Tim Taylor is one of 20 volunteers to test a new substance which could be a candidate for an AIDS vaccine. After careful counselling and a series of blood and other tests, he was injected with virus-like particles containing one of the proteins present in the AIDS virus. So why did he volunteer?
I have several friends and also some people I've worked with who have died of AIDS, and when I saw it on the news bulletin, I thought if there was something I could do that was positive to help, I would do it.
The vaccine was developed by scientists at British Biotechnology. It's produced by genetic engineering from particles found in yeast cells. The hope is it will stimulate the volunteer to produce antibodies to the protein. If it works, a real AIDS vaccine might be developed containing several HIV proteins.
We're extremely excited to be starting a vaccine program, as it were, in the UK with this first clinical study. And I think just in the, 8 years since the disease was recognized, we're already thinking in terms of prevention. A far more rapid progress has ever been done for any disease before.
If all goes well, a full-scale vaccine trial could begin in about 5 years.
And now back to Peter Sissons at Westminster.
Thank you, Anna. And still no result in the leadership ballot. Well, much the same sort of thing this last week. Joining me is the former party chairman, Cecil Parkinson, and backbencher Emma Nicholson, who came out for Michael Heseltine a day or two ago. Cecil Parkinson first, this motion of no confidence that the opposition have put down, Mr. Kinnock says whatever the outcome of the current election in the Conservative Party, a substantial proportion of that party will continue to have no confidence in whichever leader is chosen. That's true, isn't it?
No, that's wishful thinking on his part. That's what he hopes will happen. But I believe that after the election, whatever the outcome, we will all unite together, because we might have a few small differences between ourselves, but compared with the differences between us and the Labour Party, they're nothing. And we will unite and beat the Labour Party at the next election.
But if a vote of confidence is put down, it's generally debated very quickly. Is it conceivable that if tonight's result went to a second ballot, there could be a vote of confidence before the second ballot?
There could be. I believe we're going to get a result tonight, and I believe Mr. Kinnock's done us a favour, because if we get a good result tonight and a vote of confidence in the government, the whole of the Conservative Party will unite on the vote of confidence, and we'll demonstrate we are totally united against the Labour Party.
Emma Nicholson, how do you square the circle, going into the lobbies, say, to support Mrs. Thatcher's government in a vote of confidence, having voted against her in the leadership election?
I haven't voted against her, I've voted for the other candidates. And that's what democracy is all about. You have a choice. And if we don't have a choice, then we've just got a dictatorship under any party at all. I don't like having an election at the moment in that we've got these silly rules. They were gifted to us by somebody crossing the floor of the House, who then joined the Labour Party and then the Liberal Party, Mr. Humphrey Barclay. They're not actually Conservative rules. We're first past the post people. I hope we don't get a muddled result. But first past the vote, in Conservative eyes, means a single clear majority vote, and then we swing in behind the person who has won.
You heard Teddy Taylor earlier talking about, in his view, about how nasty it all was today. Nasty for the Prime Minister in Paris, knowing that people were plotting and scheming behind her back. Do you have a regret that there has been an election at all?
In politics, elections are the stuff of our life. We have a leadership election under the current rules every single November, and people are perfectly entitled to put their names forward and others to support them.
Now, Cecil Parkinson, are the rules going to be changed once this election's over?
They're the 1922 committee's rules, they're not mine. But I would have thought that this election does highlight some enormous weaknesses in the rules, and that they do need to be further examined.
John Cole, BBC's political editor, has joined us. John, are you any the wiser than the rest of us about how it's going to go?
No, I'm contented to wait for the figures now, Peter. It's a bit too late in the day to start giving forecasts, but undoubtedly both sides are at the same time elated and nervous because they've had an enormous number of promises each, but they don't know which promises to believe, because in past leadership elections, both in the Conservative Party and in the Labour Party, when they had the old system before they moved to the conference voting, more people promised the two candidates together than were actually MPs of the relevant party. Indeed, I'm told that Mrs. Thatcher and Ted Heath had more letters afterwards than there were Conservative MPs saying that they had voted for them. So understandably they're sceptical tonight until they see the actual results that Cranley-Onslow reads out.
So it's not just the most sophisticated electorate, it's the most devious electorate.
Well, it's devious because there are big political stakes here. I mean, some people think, I think Cecil Parkinson feels that this should be open balloting rather